Hello. Alright, hello teapots. It's everybody's least favorite 3D artist, Zist Xkin again. And today I am going to talk about boobs and how to get them to move on their own. And not only just, sway and bounce or whatever, but also to deform and maintain their volume like a real boob would. So you can, I don't know, get your tentacles or whatever wrapped around them, and they should work right. So I am assuming that you have a mesh and that it is enveloped. Which, by the way, envelop means to bind the mesh to the skeleton. Rigging refers to the entire process, beginning to end, making something that's easy to animate. When someone says, "Is it rigged?" what they should mean, what a professional would mean, is that there's controllers and everything works, and the mentally deficient that is the 3D animator can easily navigate through it so that they can get to their overinflated paychecks. Alright, so you get this far. I like to model them in the relaxed position. Some people try to model them like they're underwater. I don't really know if there's an advantage to that. Oh, and ignore the end guns. This mesh was made in my wilder days. Alright, so first thing we gotta do is we need a copy of this boob. And I was just going over the procedure a moment ago, and it's a little bit more complicated than it should be. If you attempt to just extract it out, then you generate some weird history that gets you in trouble later. So this tutorial is going to be a little complicated, and not for good reasons, just because Maya is stupid. Alright, so first I'm going to duplicate this mesh. And I got the old mesh in this base layer here. Always good to have layers, always good to name things. Oops. Remove. Alright, so this is my copy right here. And I'm just gonna select the old detailless areola here, so it's hopefully safe for work. If this were textured, there'd be a drawing of a bikini on it, and that makes it safe, right? So whatever. Right. And now this selection, this is the meat of the boob. This is the only part I really want to move. But just like how you'd have a root bone in a skeleton, go one more and select these vertices right here. These vertices are subcutaneous. So it's tissue that would be connected to bones, and I wouldn't really move around. And I mean real life bone. That's a little bit of a anatomy speak for you, subcutaneous. There's another angle. I didn't realize how many of those I had on this. But it won't matter. When you make your mesh, don't bullshit it like I did, I guess. Okay. So now I'm just going to go up into polygons. And you'd think you could just use extract, but if you do that, it does this, and I don't really know why. So edit mesh, duplicate face, and then delete this whole thing. And you got these two nice little boobs right here. Now this, when I mentioned earlier the bad history, this node, poly chip off, it stands between the input nodes for your mesh and the output node, which, if that doesn't make any sense to you, that's fine. All you need to know is that that's really bad. So everyone's favorite tool, delete by type, history. Not all by type, or you'll delete your rig. Just the history for a selected. There you go. So now these are just plain old meshes. Nothing special about them. And let's give them names. Let's call this one left boob cloth. We're calling it cloth because we're going to be using the cloth stuff. Right boob cloth. Also note the camel case, first word lowercase, falling words uppercase. That's a good thing to do. And now we're just going to get this ready. You gotta you gotta close off these meshes. Or maybe you don't really have to. I don't know. Wow. Let's not waste a bunch of time doing this. Whatever. Yeah, here's a lazier way to do it. You just mesh, fill hole, and because you don't want a bunch of ngons, poke face, and then I'll take it out a little bit just so it doesn't wrap over there. And that's it. That's all you got to do. That's good enough. So, oh, and another thing I like to do is to make them a different color, and of course put them in this dynamic layer right here. You gotta select them first. Add selected objects. Now we can turn them off and stuff. Yeah, I'm drinking a soda while I'm recording this. Fuck you. Okay, so next thing is we gotta make them triangulated because those are the rules. So mesh. You see, you get this mesh and edit mesh, but really, if you're using any of these tools, you're editing the mesh. So I never remember what menu anything's in. Another great part of the Maya design. You know they spent $1 billion designing the UI, right? $1 billion to design this UI. Hundreds of UI experts, which is why it's a disaster. Alright, so triangulate. There you go. And we want the history to be as clean as possible before we get started with the dynamics, because this is a history heavy process and history will fuck up everything. It's a house of cards, but when you finish, it'll work. Alright, so let's make them go into nCloth up here. Click the little space t-shirt. Have them both selected too, so you create one, I guess nCloth shape too. I guess it just makes two. I found a way to make one nCloth node control both, but I'm not going to waste my time doing that right now. So, you hit play right now, and they fall. Well, that's because they're affected by gravity, and you're going to want to select the little point right there. And I'm hitting Shift period, which grows your selection by one step. And remember those subcutaneous vertices I mentioned? Those are the root vertices we don't want to be dynamic. You select all those, and then up into N dynamics, N constraint, transform. So now these vertices are bound to this locator, and this locator can be bound to whatever we want it to. Right now it's just static, so if we hit play, they should just sit there. And see, they already look kind of nice. They're not, take my word for it, they have issues. But I mean, if all you wanted was a model that just stood there with their boobs softly wafting in, sea level air pressure, then you're done. Alright, so now we have these things, but we don't want just floating green boobs. We want this mesh to do it. This gray mesh. We want that one. So let's hide those. Hit the little nipple vert there. Select on both sides. And now I'm hitting that shift period again to grow the selection all the way up. Boop, right there. Hold on. I think it's going to be safer to do it one boob at a time, I think. Alright, so there you go. They're all selected. And then that's the left boob, and we want the left boob. Now, switch to animation, create deformers, wrap. And so what a wrap deformer is you have meshes that exert influence, and you have the mesh which is being influenced, and the vertices of the driving mesh sort of project control around them. It's like every vertice becomes a little bone, And there's some neat stuff you can do through it. The old face coming through a wall and screaming thing. That's how you do that. But you'd have to mess with a lot of settings. Right now, whatever the default is good enough. And well, let's just focus on one boob right now. I showed you how to make two. The process is the same. You just do it again on the other side. So now, when we hit play, let's smooth preview this. Just make it look extra skookum. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at it go. Nice. Alright, and so now that we're all happy, there is a problem. And that's when we try to animate this house of cards. We find out why. Oop. Oh, hold on. Remember I said that you have that locator needs to be, you can do whatever you want with it? Well, we didn't do anything with it, so select the bone. I got one big bone for the rib cage. Once again, it was during my wilder days. Select the bone, whatever is going to be the joint for your boobs. Select that locator, and it's animation, constrain, parent. Do not actually parent them. Use the parent constraint. Alright, so now look, it all seems to work together, and the boobs go. Wow, how nice. And then they flop around with the default settings very nicely. Now, what's the problem? Why isn't that okay? Well, that's why. See, the breast vertices are being driven by this bone. They're also being driven by the wrap deformer. And because the wrap and the bone are moving together, the vertices move twice as far as they need to. So there's a whole complicated way of making one big wrap deformer and slicing it into pieces that are dynamic and static, and it doesn't work. That's how I used to do it. Here's a much easier way to do it. So first, we need a new bone. So under animation, I'm holding down, what am I holding down? X to bind to the grid. Although that doesn't really, it could be anywhere. And now, because naming is always good, well, let's call it dynamic handler. Alright. So that bone's selected. Let's select our base mesh here. Go animation, skin, edit smooth skin, add influence, and here in the options, hit lock weights and set the default weight to 0. If you do not do exactly this, it will completely ruin all of your skin weights. It's unless you know exactly why you shouldn't do this. Do this. Lock weights 0, and then the rest of this is irrelevant. So there you go. Add. So you select on this, and normally the button is here under animation, but I have my own custom toolbar. It's a weird punk-haired guy in a portal getting his face painted. And doop. So here I have my root, which is in there, and it is the parent of all other bones. But then I have this dynamic handler, which isn't the parent of anything, which means that whenever my rig moves, this joint is going to stay exactly on the origin. And that's where we want it. We want it to never move. And yeah, you probably have already figured out why. So it's default locked. We unlock it. And now let's paint with replace, opacity, value, all both at 1. And I like to use this solid brush when I'm painting relatively low poly things, because it's more like I'm clicking on the vertices and that's what I want. If it's high poly, then I'll use the brush, but then ooh, and then it's never exactly, I don't know. This is my personal preference. That's how I like to do it. You'll have your own, and whatever works. That's the most important thing. Whatever works. If having a bunch of n-gons and weird topology ends up making a product that looks good, then that's all that matters. But be careful. We only want to select the vertices that are part of the dynamic, which can be a little tough with these big floppy tits that I like to model so much. And that one, come on. Switching between the smooth preview, which lets me see around corners, and the regular, which is what you need to paint. You can paint on the smooth preview, but it's weird. The vertices don't really move when they appear to, so that vertice, it's still floating out here in space. Anyways, so now those vertices are being driven by this joint, by this joint down here, which never moves. So without the wrap deformer, the body would turn, like I have it animated, and the boob would just sort of break off and stay still. But I have that wrap deformer, so, ooh, yeah, look at it go. So, why go through all the headache? Why not just use, a dynamic spline and some bones, and maybe some clever IKs to maintain the whatever? Well, so here's the main advantage to this process. So, let's get this sphere up here to demonstrate what I'm talking about. And we will make it in dynamics, mesh, create passive collider. So I also let's break connections so it doesn't move anymore. This thing, in about 1 second, it'll be all up in this boob's business. So now, ooh. So what's going on here? The boob is collapsing. Oh shit, it's not collapsing right. Well, I should have like a script or something for these videos because I forget shit a lot. All right, so. Alright, well, it collapses, which is what we want. It doesn't collapse really correctly, though, which is that, when you push something that is of a definite volume up in the bottom, the top is going to bulge out of it. So what this is simulating is sort of a bag of air, or maybe a bag of vacuum in space right now. And what we want is what we really want is a bag of water, but we're going to get what we get. So here in the nCloth node, there's a whole lot of options, and really, they're all important. So I'll just go down. So collisions, the more collision you get, the less likely something is to pass through. And when something passes through, now it's stuck. So there's things like thickness, which can prevent that, but of course, the thicker it is, the more this phantom zone, this psychic field is going to increase. So you want that as thin as possible, but then, when you do that, you risk passing through. There's also an option to increase the number of subframes. Probably in the nucleus. Well, whatever. Well, moving on. I'll do a more in-depth general dynamics and collisions thing later. So dynamic properties. This is more like with the spline we made. And has some familiar things. There's rigidity, stretch resistance. I gotta say, skin is not that stretchy. Try to stretch some of your skin right now. It doesn't really go very far. So stretch resistance should be pretty high. If you need long droopy boobs, model long droopy boobs. You can You can do that too. Make them real floppy. But they don't stretch. It's not stretch. You'd want to turn down this bend resistance. That sort of, you model it the way you want it. Mass, you want mass relatively low, so its own weight doesn't interfere with some of these things. And yeah, here we go. Pressure. This is the thing that separates it between a cloth and a boob. Set it to the volume tracking model, and what this does is it treats the cloth as if it were a solid piece of something. You know, it could be a balloon full of air, or it could be a solid piece of rubber, or, you know, it could even be titanium, being, you know, with super high stretch and bend resistance, but still elastic. So we got some of these options here. So air tightness, keep that at 1, unless you want a boob that slowly deflates. Oh look, already it's already better. If you turn this down, yeah. Incompressibility here is another good one. This one, the higher this is, the more it'll bulge out in response to collapsing in other areas. It's already at 5, which is already really high. You set it to 0, then it basically doesn't do volume tracking at all. You turn that up, you turn it up to 200, and it doesn't. And it looks like they set it at 5, and they meant it. Pump rate and start pressure. So this is sort of like if it were full of air or something. This is perfect if you're, into inflation. This is how you do it. So start pressure is how much air or media is already inside, ready to make this mesh expand. 0 is, we'll call that atmospheric. It's static. It's normal. It's not going to go in or out. Set it to 1, and right away, it didn't plump out that much. Let's set it to 500. Wow, that didn't do anything. That's making me look stupid. That was working a moment ago. Set the stretch resistance to 1. And set the start pressure to 50. You'll see what I mean. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, more like that. And then pump rate is the same thing, but over time. So we'll set that to 1. And it'll start off normal and then inflate very quickly. And if this is what you're... Oh, it'll also never stop. If this is what you're going for, that's how to do it. Word of the wise, though, because I did make my own breast expansion animation once. The triangulated mesh will sort of unroll like a slinky, because you've got all these triangles that create a spiral, and it'll unscrew itself. So, a skin texture, that's not going to be obvious, but if there's any sort of pattern on here, people are going to see, ooh, the tits unraveling. Right, okay, so I've rambled about that long enough. Let's put this back to 20. Actually, maybe let's do it at 10, just to give a little bit of, there we go. Yes, so, what else? So another thing is, I talked about the phantom psychic field. It looks like it's happening right now, but really what that is that this is smoothed, which presumably your final mesh would be, and this thing is not, and it looks right here and it looks wrong here. So the advantage to this system is that you have complete control over how much CPU you use. If you need highly detailed collisions, then you use a high resolution cloth mesh. So if you need something that is gonna ooze through fingers or through fishnet or whatever is going on, you want really high resolution. If it's just like they're just gonna flop around, maybe just get cupped by a gentle hand, then about this is okay. Anything less than that, and you might as well just use bones with a spline. They'll flop around, they'll look great, but they won't maintain their volume and they won't collapse. But if that's not what you're doing, then don't do it. Don't go too far. What the fuck was that noise? What is fuck? Yeah. Anything else? All right. So this is this is what it is. Now you can control it in that way. Oof. Yeah, don't do that. But yeah, if there's any questions, post it on 3. Do comments. I'll probably not read comments. I don't know. Email me. Find me somewhere and say, oh, you didn't explain how to do this, and I'll do another video about it. Alright. Okay. Fuck off.